Hello, everybody. Welcome to David Talks. It's very nice to meet you all. This is my first episode, and it's very nice to be meeting you all. Um, what this channel is going to be about is it's going to be talking about the crime and the drama that has existed in our history of the United States, and of course, outside the United States. Where we talk about UFOs, crime, drama, and also ghosts and stuff, and just a lot of the scary stuff that's going to give you chills up your spine. But first, what I want to do is I want to introduce myself. My name is David. About 2 months ago, I turned 28. I'm actually almost a New Year's baby, which makes me a Capricorn. And so it's very interesting just how close it was, right? Because I was born on the 2nd of January, so instead of like most people, it's also probably more interesting if they're born on the 25th and the 1st of January. Um, as well, my parents, they both have interesting cultures. My mom is actually Cuban, which makes me part Cuban, and my dad's from Kentucky. Now, the interesting thing is, I don't really know a lot of Spanish to where I still struggle with it. I mean, I can have a light conversation with it, and it's a very unique thing because people, when they look at me in person, they automatically think, wow, this guy looks very white and he's got green eyes. There's like no way in hell. And immediately, like when I used to work in my old job, and of course when I was like in high school, there would be people that would be speaking Spanish and then I would speak with them. So when they saw me talk, they were like, "Holy shit, man! Like wow! I can't believe you're Spanish. You look so damn white." So and I'm like looking at them like funny, and I'm like, okay, but at the time I was like, okay, well, that's kind of weird, but looking back at it and actually, older and being more wiser and actually seeing how I look, I could see why. But that's with anybody. Anybody's mixed with different cultures, right? So you just never know. I mean, everybody's mixed with something in the culture, right? Just like you have black Cubans and you have white Cubans and all that stuff. Um, but everybody here in the United States is all mutts, right? We're all mixed with something very interesting, whether it's Cuban, Haitian, Puerto Rican, mixed with American, or Chinese. Really cool. So basically, the things that I like to do is I like to read about stuff like history and scary stories, and I like to share it with people. I've always been interested in the paranormal, mainly because, well, when I was younger, and so when I was younger, being the youngest of five brothers and one sister, I had a brother that passed away in a motorcycle accident when I was 4 years old. Now, when he died, I was very curious about life after death, right? But at the time, I couldn't really process it all, right? Because I remember when I was 4 years old, when he passed away, when we were at the funeral parlor, it was very hard for me to process. It was very hard for me to process when we die, right? Because I thought that when we died, we took our bodies with us. And trying to ask my dad at that age about death to where the soul goes into heaven, of course, in my opinion, being as a Catholic, because I know some people don't really believe in it, but that's just how I was raised. It just gave you a very funny feeling, and I couldn't really process it. So, and on top of that, it also had an effect on me not getting to know my older brother very well. And pretty much to this day, it makes me more spiritual, of course, more spiritual that when we die, there is a place that we go, and, and there is something that we can, that we relate to. Now, the interesting thing about it is just the amount of stories that I've heard about it. Now, first I'll say this. There's a channel that's going up. It's going to be with my best friend Cassie. It's called the Cassie Dave Hour. That's in the works, but I mainly wanted to get this channel, of course, since this is also a self-entitled podcast. Now, this is my first time doing it. As well, I go to school right now. My class starts actually tomorrow, as a matter of fact. So today is pretty much March 3rd, 2024. I don't know when this is going to be going up, probably sometime this week or next week. And so it just very interested me. Now, I don't really want to brag about me a lot because I know it's probably boring and stuff, and you guys want to get to the nitty gritty. What we're going to be talking about in this episode is we're going to be talking about um, ghosts and all that stuff, ghosts and hauntings. Now, what is the definition of the word ghost, right? The definition of the word ghost can have several meanings to it. Number one, when people hear the word ghost, obviously, you guys think of first thing is your mind when you're a kid, when you're 5 years old, you automatically think, okay, it's a person wearing white sheets over him, and they look like that one ghost from Shaggy from Scooby Doo, right? Not that type of ghost. Some, obviously you guys know that, but for those that don't know what that definition stands for, that's what it means. Now, ghost is entitled as in lost soul, a person that is trapped in between worlds because they're afraid of judgment, and that allows them to be in between worlds, right? And being interesting, reading about all this paranormal stuff and also the theological stuff. And I don't really mean to turn this into a religious conversation, to be upfront with you. Because I know people are going to be like, oh, this guy's mentioning religion and all that stuff. Get away, right? He could be like one of those guys or one of those Christians or Jehovah's Witnesses that plant the seed. I'm really not. This is just part of the topic that interests me, and it correlates to the paranormal. Now, let me just first start off and say, right, for people that do not believe in ghosts or spirits and all that stuff, they especially believe that there is a Big Bang Theory, right? The Big Bang Theory was theorized that the Earth was created by an inanimate occurrence, meaning that there was an explosion that happened in space that allowed the explosion to create all of us, right? Now, this is where it ties into paranormal because, and let me just say this, with science has all the answers to, when you're a scientist, you try to find the answers to everything, even if it's something that's paranormal, right? It even, in science, it classifies things that never really happened, things that never really happened in our life, and we weren't even there to experience it, right? Like the Big Bang Theory. How do we know that there was a Big Bang Theory, right? Because we weren't there. I mean, we were, how do we know how the Earth was made, right? I mean, we weren't even there to see it. So, what I tell people, right, because let me tell you something, truth is stranger than fiction, right? And I look at it like this, right, is people that do not believe that there was somebody that created all of us has got to be on something, right? And the reason why that I say this is because, for example, right, and I tell people this, and I came up with this analogy when I was 19, and I've told people this, right, is, for example, right, if I want to write the word cat, right, on a piece of paper, let's say if I have a pencil in my hand, right, if we're technically talking about the Big Bang Theory, which basically scientists are basically indirectly saying that unconscious, right, an unconscious act created intelligent beings with brains to where they can think for themselves, right? Because if that was the case, I would not be able to take my hand and write the word cat on a piece of paper, right? So go and examining that philosophy and the analogy, right? If I take a piece of paper, right, and I want to write the word cat, right, I'm not going to be able to write the word cat unless I have intelligence that is manifest in my hand to create the circulature and the symmetrical portion of the letter that is on the paper, right? The word cat, for example. Now notice that for me to manifest that action of the word cat to appear on the paper, I'm actually thinking to my brain and saying, hey, to write the word cat, I have to draw a half circle on a piece of paper and also an A, right, which is a circle with a line underneath it as a support, stand, right, and a T as in like a plus sign. That manifested intelligence. Now, if we want to go deeper in that, right, knowing that we have everything that is conscious, right, for us to examine, right, conscious that allows the manifestation of action, right, there's just no way in hell that there was something unconscious that created these vast complexity systems of life, right? Because right? And again, I don't mean to go into a religion topic because, this episode is a very broad topic, which is bridging into the ghosts and, of course, the spirits, right? That people have experiences with, right? And also angels, right? But getting back to that topic, right? For example, let's say, as an example, right? Um, you know, we say this. We now know that there was a conscious being, possibly, that created the vast complexity system of life. Because, look, there was something that manifested the idea, right, of something or some being that is uncomprehendable to explain, right? So if I say, right, if I say, for example, let's say he says, I want to make human beings. How am I going to make human beings? Okay, well, how am I going to make human beings? Well, I'm going to create a human skeleton to outline the flesh. I'm going to make the appendages. I'm going to make some legs. But how are they going to live? Well, I want to make eyes, right? But how are the eyes are going to be structured? Well, we have the cornea. We also have the retina, and it's all controlled by muscle. Now, go into the oxygen part of it, right? Now we know how the humans can see by the light that is going into the eyes. Think about it. Is, for example, let's say they say, there was a being that definitely said, hey, um, you know, how are these human beings going to live? Well, I'm going to be supplying them with oxygen, right? Oxygen. Well, where's the oxygen going to come from? Well, it's going to be coming from, they're going to have cells in their blood that's going to be called red blood cells that's going to be flowing through their veins. But what are these blood cells going to be containing of? Well, the blood cells are going to be containing the portion of oxygenic or if I'm not sure if it I'm not or basically oxygen particles that are going to be manifested into the blood platelets with the trees, for example, right? So the oxygen is going to be coming through the chloroplast. So, and because we need trees to live, right? So imagine that was planned out, right? My whole point is the vast complexities of life that we have in our system was not just the Big Bang Theory. It took intelligence to manifest. The only thing science can discover is the structure and, of course, the structure and, of course, the function of it. It can't tell the future. It could only predict the future, and it can't tell the past, which could only predict the past. Now, we now know. Now, getting into, now that we know that, or have an idea possibly that, there is a realm that we go to, we know when we die, right? Now, with that in mind, we know people have had experiences, right? And people are more open-minded because people believe in some religions that when we die, that's it, right? That's it, right? And, again, in my opinion, I believe that, um, that, you know, being a Catholic, that there's a place that we go to, right? And, science has definitely proved that there is energy. Energy, cannot be destroyed, right? I believe the saying is energy cannot be created or nor destroyed, or no, I can't remember. I think energy can be created but not destroyed. But whatever the case may be, there is energy in everything. Energy, like right now, in our bodies, there is a soul that is in our bodies that is allowed to manifest the movements in our hands. There is energy in plants. There is energy everywhere, right? So, I'm going to be talking to you about, stories that I've read and, of course, my own personal experiences, to where it's like, wow, this is kind of weird. Why did I see that, right? Now we're getting to the nitty gritty part, right? So I don't want this episode to sound like I'm a pastor or a preacher and all that stuff, because that's not really the whole goal. My whole goal is to provide my beliefs correlating into this conversation on why, on what we're talking about, and of course, the paranormal. Now, I'm going to be talking to you about people that I've known, right? And of course, like I said, I have another channel that's in the works, the Cassie Dave Hour. I want to talk to you about my experience and of course, my brother's. And I've had a lot of experiences through my brother's story, and I've had my own personal experience. There's so many, it's just hard to choose. But, and all these are like true stories that I've heard, right? And there's some, so one of the stories that I thought was very creepy, that was from one of my older brothers, was it was actually, so my grandmother lived in this house, and you know this house was like, again, this was before I was born, and there was rumors that the area that she lived in, from a man that my brother talked to, that was over 100, that was at least 100 years old at that time. We're talking about like the late 1990s, or probably late 1990s, early 2000s. So I must have been like maybe 3 years old back then, 4 years old. And, you know, weird stuff started happening into the house. Now, the crazy thing about it is the neighbors that bought the house before my grandmother bought the house in the 70s, was there was an autistic kid that was there, and this kid was so violent to where he would bang his head on the walls. Now, again, the stories that we hear, right, of neighbors that have energy like that is very violent, that can stir up some paranormal because it's negative energy, right? We have negative energy. Negative energy is energy that is manifested by negativity, right? Like the evil actions that we do, right? Or that, by deceiving, or people out there that do crazy stuff, they commit these murders and crimes and all that stuff. And, that can manifest and open up evil entities, right? And, but, kind of getting off topic, because this is a very broad topic. Getting back to the story was, actually, there was actually going to my uncle's story, this one's more creepy, was one day my uncle was, laying in bed, by himself, in his room one night. This is probably like around the late 70s. And all of a sudden, he wakes up in the middle of the night, and there is a little girl staring dead ass at him, dead ass, right? The first thing that pops up into his mind is, oh, well, this must be my cousin, right? He described it as a little girl wearing a white dress, having brown eyes, staring right at him. Now, the interesting thing about that was thinking that this was a relative of his. He kept looking at this little girl. Now, the little girl started, laughing and all that stuff at him. And my uncle just like looked at her, trying to process it. Now, this little girl got up, basically uncrossing, what do they call it? Crisscross applesauce, right? Where basically gets back up, right? Goes into the long hallway. My uncle follows the little girl into the hallway, and all of a sudden, she goes into the living room underneath a pillow, and she's gone, right? Now, if you were to see this in person yourselves, again, science tries to predict everything. It is all skepticism, right? That the human brain tries to find answers for everything, right? What I mean by that is, right, when something happens, we are scientists ourselves, right? We try to come up with these assumptions, right? How did this little girl manifest, right? This little girl manifest something, right? How did that happen? Was I dreaming? Or according to my uncle, he wasn't. He was 100% up, right? Now, that experience could have been one or two things. Number one, it could have been a little girl that might have died in the house, right? And her energy was still there, right? And still trying to figure out who these new neighbors are. Or number two, it could just be residual energy. Now, residual energy, what that is it is energy that is, so we are all made up of energy, right? We touch something, we sit down, it's going to be warm, right? But I guarantee, like we all knew in elementary school, you take a multimeter and you start to, start to, yeah, it's a multimeter. You start seeing the volts go up, right? Because we're all made of electricity, right? Our heart provides electricity within our bodies that is allowed, which basically is proof that there is energy. We are supplying energy. Our body is a battery, right? Now, residual energy, right? It leaves an imprint of where the individual was. For example, right? The individual could be alive or the individual could be deceased, right? But their energy is still there. It's like a tape recorder. Depending on the right environment, right? Let's say you go into a dining room table and you're sitting down, right? And you're doing the same ritual every day. You go into the kitchen, going into the microwave, sitting down, eating your pasta, right? You do this consecutively every day for a while, right? Little do you know that you're actually, as you're doing that, you're not just simply nourishing your body to eat, right? You're leaving energy behind, right? As well, where you go, where you touch, all that stuff. Now, what happens is on the if depending on the right atmosphere and the right temperature, right, that individual could no longer be in the house, right, and that energy could be manifest, right, and there's been stories about that, right. Right? There's been stories, kind of going into, let's say, California, right? We're going into, the western area, right, where the cowboys were, right? There was this one story where there was a lady. She was in one of the, old saloons, right? And she was one of the individuals that was one of, like, the self-guided tours. She was basically like a tour guide, right? And she worked at this old school museum, what used to be a saloon with all the cowboys and all that stuff back in the mid 1800s. Now, kind of correlating to that, right, with the, she says that one night, she's basically, closing up the place. She's gone for the night, and all of a sudden, she sees this man coming out of the saloon. Right, he's wearing boots. He's wearing one of those brown leather pants that they used to wear over their pants back in those days. Dressed in a typical cowboy outfit, right? You know how they used to dress. And the thing was very solid the way she described it. And she described it as, very solid, like it was somebody that was alive. So she calls this individual and says, "Hey, what are you doing here?" This thing kept ignoring her and kept on walking. Then it disappeared, right? That would be a perfect example of a residual entity, right? It's not an actual person, but it's the energy of the person that's left over. Um, you know, moving quite along, there's other stories that's happened. For example, that I've read is there was another story where there was this individual going on Clinton Road. I'm not sure where Clinton Road. I believe it is in. Let me check because I don't want to give you the wrong information. But Clinton Road is in. Let me see if I could remember the location where it was. Oh, New Jersey. Yes, that's where it was. Just as I figured, New Jersey. And right, there's this long road, this long dark road that people have gone into, and they would see apparitions of ghosts, and of course these ghostly headlights. Right now, kind of correlating to that, right, there was this one couple that I read, right, where they were driving on the road one night, and all of a sudden there's like these headlights that's like flickering in back of their car, and they're saying to themselves, okay, well, there's like an aggressive driver that's like right in back of us. So they're driving on the road, and all of a sudden, right as they're driving, on this road, there is the headlights just start becoming aggressive from a distance, right? Aggressive from a distance, flickering on and off. Now, the first thing that's happening into their minds is, there's a sign that this individual is displaying to them as they're driving. Okay, why are they flashing their lights at us, right? We're minding our own business, having a good time, even a date, and these lights flickering. Now, with this in mind, right, all of a sudden the headlights become closer and closer, right? Same thing. They're driving, flickering on and off, right? Then it gets closer, 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 closer. And I mean too close to where the light's becoming bright and back of their, within their rearview mirror. So all of a sudden, right, after that intensity, the car disappears, right? And it left them confused. How could a car, right, 1 minute be bright as they're driving and all of a sudden it's just gone? How is that possible? How is that possible? So, there is no explanation about it. Now, by talking to the people in the city where they were stayed in, being nearby by that road, people started saying, they started hearing about the similar experiences, that there was always a car with headlights flickering on and off. And that just, and they're like, oh my God, we saw the same thing. We saw the same thing, these headlights. Now, as they started getting more comfortable and they started, talking about the story, right, that they ruled out, thinking that they weren't the only ones crazy, that they knew it was paranormal. Legend has it that there was a girl in the late 1980s, right, in her early 20s, and she had a Camaro at that time. And, well, this is really not a legend, but it actually happened, basically, because it's on the record, that it did happen on that road. But anyway, there was basically a girl in her early 20s that got into an accident on that road. She was driving, and then all of a sudden the car swerved, towards the ditch, and she died on impact of the accident. Now, people that have got on this road often report mysterious headlights, right? Mysterious headlights. Now, knowing that, could it be the girl, right? The girl that, that's actually stuck in between worlds, still driving, trying to find her way, thinking she's still alive? Who knows? Who knows? So, I think it's a very interesting story, that you guys could read, right? Clinton Road. It just gives you like chills reading it a bit. For those of you guys, when you were like in elementary school, there used to be a book. It was called Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark. Now, it's kind of interesting there was a similar, thing that happened where but again, it's all, I think, who knows, this story could have been influenced for Alvin Schwartz to write that book, right? Who knows, right? Because it's a similar story and it's a similar feel. I remember reading in the book in elementary school, I can't remember that, I think it was called High Beams, that was the name of the story. But the only thing is, though, it wasn't a ghost, but it was more scary. And I remember there was this, it was a story about this girl that was driving all alone in the road in this crazy car that's like right in back of her is like flashing high beams on. And she's thinking, God, what are these high beams on, man? Like, why am I driving and this guy's being a dick, right? So all of a sudden, going back and forth, figuring out what it was, right? She started getting like, oh my gosh, it's blind, blind, it's blind. So, again, this car follows her into the house, right? All of a sudden, she gets into the house, right? Calls the cops. The cops come, they go to the woman's car, and they say, the cops come, and apparently there was a guy that was in the back seat in the car, right? So the story was a twist. It was basically, a guy in the car that was warning the lady, hey, there's somebody in the car. He might do something to you. I'm trying to protect you as you're driving to give you the cue that you need to call the cops, right? So anyway, if you guys want to read that. Now, let's move on to another story, Robert the Doll, okay? For those of you that don't know what the story about Robert the Doll is back in the early 1900s, there was a family that lived right next to this lady that was from Haiti. Now, the child was named, I believe his name was Eugene. I can't remember I think his name was Eugene Otto. Eugene Otto. Now, the lady that was from Haiti did not like his family, right? So apparently the woman put like a voodoo spell on the doll, and of course, gave it to Eugene, right, as like a gift. Now, what the interesting thing about this story is the fact that once he got the doll, weird stuff started happening. The child started to report a the child started to report the doll telling him what to do, right? Because you know there was a couple stories where he would do disrespectful stuff to his parents. He would cut his mom's hair. He would throw stuff on the floor. He would break stuff. And the first thing that his parents would say is, Eugene, what is your problem? Why are you doing all these accidents, right? Meanwhile, the first word that came to Eugene was, Robert told me to do it, right? Notice the similarity, right, with this story about the show or the movie Child's Play, right? Um, you know, there was actually like a rumor that this story was basically so famous to where it allowed the director to create the movie, a doll that would like come to life behind their parents' back and tell the kid to do bad stuff, right? But I think that's kind of interesting. It could be true. Who knows? But so anyway, Eugene would do all this silly stuff, and again, the same response was, Robert told me to do it. So neighbors would report right across the street on the upstairs bedroom where Eugene was. They would see the curtains move and there would be nobody there, right? Can you imagine that? That'd give you creeps, gives you goosebumps, I bet. Now, they would also hear like, the doll, hear voices around the doll and stuff. So anyway, long story short, Mr. Eugene, um, died with the doll. He had the doll, till he was an elderly man, probably in his late 60s, early 70s. And so the doll, he died with the doll, he died with the doll in custody, right? So he had the doll for basically his whole entire life. Now, the doll is currently in Key West. The bearers that were able to, grab the doll, they were able to put it into a museum because bad stuff started happening, right? The legend, and this is a no shit story. There's people that have had stories about bad stuff happening to them, right? Now, the one thing that I've heard, and also read that a lot of people can tell you that they know that, on how well they know this story is for something bad to happen to you from Robert the doll, because the doll is in a glass case. Ghost Adventures did a episode on it. If you guys did Ghost Adventures and weird stuff started happening, but the doll is in a glass case. Now, the doll gets very furious if you decide to take a picture of it without permission, right? Because if you take a picture without its permission, bad stuff's going to happen. And there's been quite a lot of stories of that happening. For people out there that don't believe that this is true, I highly advise you to do something that you do not want to mess with. Just don't do it, in my opinion. There might be guys out there that are cocky. My mom's one of them because I've told it to her. She's like, oh, well, I want to go over there, and, take a picture without its permission. No, you don't want to do that. All it takes is out one time. And there's been people. There's people that have died. There was one guy. There was actually one story where there was a guy and his wife, right? The wife was very cocky, right? The wife was taunting the doll, saying, come on, Robert. I'm going to take a picture without your permission. Just randomly took a picture. About an hour later, they got into a very bad car accident and the wife died, but the husband lived. Can you imagine that? There was another story, right, where, there was a guy that, took a picture of the, of the doll without its permission, right? A year later, he was diagnosed with cancer. Can you believe that? Tell me that's not a coincidence. Tell me that's not a coincidence. So, if you want to see the doll, go right ahead. I'm not going near that thing. I'm not going to even dare set foot to that thing because life is short, man. You don't want to get into something that is the unknown and could really, really screw you up. That's my take on it. But the doll is located in Key West. It's in a glass case, you know. So, but kind of correlating to that, there is just so many stories. I'll tell you my one personal experience with my ghost story. That I've had experiences with. Now, the first experience I would say that I have, and I've told people this, right, was so I'll never forget this one night where, and it was clear as day. So my brother was watching TV. I was like 8 years old, 7, 8 years old, and I remember he was watching Inuyasha at that time, right, on Adult Swim, and I'll never forget. This is probably around 1 o'clock in the morning, and I remember this was like in the summer because I didn't have school. Because if I didn't have school, I would stay up late, and I'd go to bed like at 1, and I'd get up, play video games with my brother and stuff, and all that typical kid stuff. So next thing you know, this one night, I had to go get a drink of water because I was so damn thirsty. So all of a sudden, I go into the kitchen, and the way my kitchen is set up is there's a sink, and right behind the sink there is a window, right, which leads to the back porch. And we have these yellow curtains that are hanging up. It's like white and yellow. And I'll never forget, I got that drink of water, and I just can remember looking at that window that there was something that was in the kitchen with me, right? And I'm getting goosebumps with this, and right, and that freaked me the hell out, right? It just freaked me the hell out because, first of all, I knew it was something paranormal. I knew in my gut feeling that it was something. It just did not make sense. I was the only one in the kitchen. I still don't know what shape or form this thing was. I really don't. So, immediately I just had just straight and, like screaming, and I dropped my water on the floor. And my brother came out and he said, "What's the matter?" And I said, there's something that I saw in the window, right? Which at the time I thought was outside because at the time I was like, okay, I'm seeing something, but I'm not next to it, right? And I kind of look back, I think it was something that was manifesting right next to me. Now, my brother was like, "Oh, there's nobody out there. There's nobody out there." So I'm like, I just saw something, I saw something. There's something there. I saw something, right? And, he goes, "There's like nothing there." So anyway, that freaked me the hell out. It really did. It just freaked me the hell out. I was scared to go to bed that night. And I remember he had to take a shower and he left me all alone in that room. And I was just scared, man. I really was. And I remember he comforted me and he said, because we had a cat at that time. Her name was Princess. It was a white cat. He says, "Oh, Princess will keep you company." Now, when I tell people, like if I tell him this story, he's not going to remember it, but I remember it as clear as day. I really do. And it just freaked me the hell out. Again, I don't know who it was, if it could have been my brother that passed away 3 years before, because weird stuff did start to happen, right? And, another story that kind of gives me chills was, so talking about when my brother passed, right? Before he died, he went out with this one girl that lived, in our neighborhood. And I'll never forget, one of her, I think she had a niece. It was a niece, I believe. Was it a niece? Yeah, a niece or a nephew. I can't remember. And so my brother, he when he went on the motorcycle, I guess the park that he died in was really like a couple. He died basically oh my gosh, the way the length of the park is, I'm not good at estimated math. I would say he died maybe 20 feet away from her house because it wasn't really that far. And so one day, she was, the kid was like, in the living room, laughing and playing. And I guess her mom, which would be the kid's, grandmother, saw the kid play, in the living room, right? And she's going up to the kid and she's saying, um, she's going up to the kid and she's, to her grandson or granddaughter and saying, "Who are you playing with?" Right? She goes, "I'm playing with Mike." That was my brother's name, Mike, right? She looks at the kid and says, "Well, that's kind of odd because he passed away a couple weeks ago. How could you say you're playing with him if he's gone, right?" She goes, "He's not gone." And she goes, "He's gone." She said in Spanish, "She's gone. Él no está aquí, él no está aquí." So all of a sudden, the child says, "Yeah, he is." Well, she goes, "Where's he at?" Points to an empty spot on the couch. Points to an empty spot on the couch. That's just scared. That's scary. You always hate those stories where, and it's always the child, right? The child plays, with something that is like, something, a spirit of something, or something that you can't see with your naked eye. That always gives you the chills up your spine because you're like, wow, it's always with the kids. And here you have the kid pointing, somewhere in a corner, right? And there's nothing there. You can't see it, but they can see it. I've actually read online why this was the case, actually. And again, this is all theories and stuff, but from what I've read, the reason why that's the case, because if you ever notice, and I used to have this, I kind of had this and then it went away as I got older, but, children have very good intuition. They can see stuff that adults cannot see. And the main reason is because there's many factors that are factored into it. It's basically because of their brain, the way their brain is developing, their senses are new. I mean, you ever remember when you were a kid and, you remember going to McDonald's, and getting a vanilla shake and kind of like remembering like, the taste of how fresh it was and how, it was more fresher than it is now, right? Or not even a McDonald's shake, but anything like, when you were a kid, like things were more painful, and your taste buds were a little bit more sensitive and all that. It's basically that, your brain is extremely developing, your senses are new, and you're basically close to, you know, um, basically being, you're basically close to the afterlife, which means is, think about it, if you're seeing these things, when you're 5, 6 years old, you gotta understand, you've only been on this earth for about 5 years, right? 5 years before that, you weren't even really born, you weren't even existent, which is another way of basically saying that you're closer to a new dimension, when you're developing your senses. I can remember when I was a child, believe it or not. This is a no shit story, and I've told people this. I can remember when I was a child, right? And actually being into a room. I remember one day, I mean, this would happen, a bunch of times when I was like when I was about 4 or 5 years old, I would watch Blue's Clues on television, and kid you not, as I'm getting goosebumps right now, um, I would feel something in the room, that would walk in. Now, the best way to describe it, is it's like a pressure in the room, like there's a presence that walked into the room. It's like just something that's just there, like you're not the only one there. It's just a pressure, like something's there, like there's a pressure in the air, like you feel like you're not alone. There's just something there. I would actually feel like I would feel it mostly in my back room. I would feel it in the kitchen sometimes. And, and at that time, I remember thinking to myself, I was like, wow, what is it like? Why am I feeling this? Like this kind of feels like as if my dad walked into a room or my brother walked into a room, like you just, I haven't had that feeling ever since, like I knew, like it started going away when I was like 12 years old, So when I was a kid, but I just remember seeing that, and that would kind of make sense that when you're a child, you're more prone to like seeing things, that is extremely out of this world. and all that. So, well, everybody, what I'm going to do is I'm going to end this on a very positive note. Stay tuned for the next episode, as it will get more scary. Again, my name is David. Welcome to David Talks. This channel is going to be about the paranormal, UFOs, stories, and especially crime and drama. Hopefully you enjoy this channel. You guys have a great day. See you later.